Hey, the recording in progress is on. Welcome to a special edition of Living Courageously Exposed. This is March 20th. Oh my heck!
20th.
Welcome to the first day of spring. It also happens to be the astrological new year, which which if you think about it makes a lot of sense because having New Year on the Gregorian calendar where we have it doesn't make sense when you're like making all these goals and stuff when it's the freaking dead of winter. But right here where spring happens and like new growth is coming up, it makes a whole lot of sense to have New Year and new goals. And I don't like the word goals or believe in that, but new intentions. Yeah. So for those of you who have slipped on your New Year's resolutions, this is take two, and you can go along with the stars. So, speaking of like ahas and breakthroughs and all of that, we're bringing this special edition. Oh, by the way, I'm Jen Saunders, your host, and the co-host is
And what?
you
Sorry, you're
are.
cutting it.
Who are you?
Oh, who am I? I'm
Yeah,
Leah, spelled Ligia.
awesome. I'm cutting out,
Where am I hanging out? What
folks,
did you say?
and that is like communication breakdown 101.
It's like that game of telephone.
Yeah,
Some of the most random things would come out of that game, don't you think?
yeah. So, speaking of new growth and ahas, after yesterday's edition of Living Courageously Exposed, Leah and I were having conversation in the evening, and it was a really beautiful conversation. I kind of wish we'd had a majority of it recorded, and we just decided to do this as because it wasn't recorded and just give you some of the aha moments that came for us individually during that recording of yesterday's podcast and to just talk about them like how like living in real life and the ahas that happen and just bringing you the like after the conversation after the yesterday's title of the podcast was protection gone awry and I which actually ended up being a really beautiful title because it's exactly what happened without it being known, but kind of known, and we'll explain that. So yesterday we were talking about if you haven't listened to that episode, head on over to the Righteous Rebels YouTube page. We are recording this on Zoom today, and it will be broadcast to those channels. So Righteous Rebels, um, oh my gosh, YouTube page, YouTube channel, the Righteous Rebels Facebook group, and then it's over on Spotify at Living Courageously Exposed. We would love for you to share those out and help us grow our audience. Let us know what you like about us living courageously exposed as well as our guests. And then if you or someone you know has a great story or something of that, let us know. We'd love to have you on. But interesting conversation afterwards. And I just want to say in advance, Leah, thank you again for just really modeling yesterday what living courageously exposed is. And maybe some of you caught what was going on yesterday, which is why we wanted to come on here today because lots of you probably didn't. And just talk about that, how protection gone awry can happen so quickly, excuse me, and a lot of times unrecognized, and learning how to become familiar with what those signs are when the people in your world and lived experience fall into protective spaces or fearful spaces and how those parts of their being show up and can take them over and they don't even recognize that they're in that space and then how really ugly damaging conversations, it's usually not conversations, it's just interactions or fights or whatever can take place versus having the emotional growth and intelligence and calmness and peace of mind in your own heart to go, uh, I see what's happening here, and then finding ways to come to resolution. So, with that said, I'm actually just going to turn the time over to Leah. I loved yesterday's conversation. Um, Leah, uh, I'm like, I honestly don't know how to start this conversation.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I think so I appreciate the acknowledgement of modeling living courageously exposed. I think I haven't known what that actually means until I've met you and just some of the deep dives that you and I do to really know what it means to live that way and embody what that means. So thank you. No, thank you. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Thank
no,
you
that's the
for
truth sometimes. It really does feel like that.
um well, it causes you to look at parts of you that you don't even know are there. And if you get into a place of judgment of it, it can be really challenging. I think one of the biggest things I've learned in my work with you is just learning not to judge and what that means. And we'll touch on judgment later on in this conversation because I think that's a really important part when we're talking about triggered spaces. So we talked a little bit yesterday about how we can get into these spaces a lot of times. You can call it dissociation, or there's um there's a splitting off. Usually somewhere in our history, there's been a traumatic event or something that's gone on, and to cope with it, albeit ineffectively, or to not have to feel what's happening, we there's a part of us that splits off, and a protective piece of us takes over. And so while that supported us in those challenging situations, in our youth, in our young adults, in a different part of our adult life, in our childhood, wherever, that doesn't always translate to being effective in our current relationships, and it can create a really unhealthy dynamic with, someone that we're trying to build relationship with, but something that can trigger that protection to come into play when really it's not what we want, but it's a protective piece. It's something that's there to help us um, just protect ourselves and shut off the feeling. I think that's one of the biggest things I've been learning,
So,
is that it's a way to not feel.
mm, yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that description and just like spelling that out as to what that is for you and maybe, how it feels for other people who are watching this. The listener, watcher, may experience that a little bit differently. And if so, that totally cool. We would love to actually hear what that experience is for you. As Leah, you were talking, it reminds me of when you're talking about this splitting off, the word remember came into my mind when this often talk about, or we hear other people talk about remembering who we are. And I love that because if you break the word down, it's actually a remembering. We're bringing back the different members of our being and of our person back into the whole so that we can be all of who we are instead of all these splinter pieces that we've created as a way to protect ourselves, emotionally, maybe it's spiritually, maybe it's even physically, um, mentally for sure. And so I love that, like remembering, and I love the way you describe that because as we talked about it later in the night, you had a remembering experience yesterday, right here live for everyone to notice, and whether they noticed it or not, it was quite an experience. And I'm just going to say this, again, if you haven't watched the episode from the 20th, so Wednesday the 20th of March, head on over and watch that one, but pay really close attention to the beginning of the episode and watch it all the way through and just watch what happens as and I'm going to say pay particular attention to the beautiful Leah, and just just notice, and then like look at maybe some people in your world and be like, where have I noticed that before? Where have I noticed that in myself? and how how I might behave that way, or you might behave that way, or show up and you don't even recognize it. But there are telltale signs when a particular piece of us, which we call space, it's fear, it's protection, it's an old pattern that was used to keep you safe from whatever it is you needed to be kept safe from, shows up, takes over, and then it's like, unless the person you're conversing with has an understanding, a lot of times it's game over. So because it can be very hard. It can be really hard. And I say that because Leah and I talk about how challenging it is to um, be in an event. I don't call it a conversation because it's not a conversation, but to be in an event with and trying to communicate with that protective piece that just is like, F you. Like I'm gonna do anything I can to protect this person no matter what. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that and just the remembering that you had yesterday. And so take it away, like keep talking.
So we started that conversation just after we had kind of come to some sort of resolution with the space. And, feelings were shared and conversation happened and we had worked through it, or so I thought. Um
This is as she's asking
we
me if
got
I
on.
want to do the podcast.
Which is legit because
I know.
I had a interview I had seen, and I know this is stuff that Jen talks about all the time that I've learned a great deal of, and I felt that it was important. I think something that felt triggering for me in that moment that kind of shifted me back into that space, not even recognizing until later on in the episode, was before we got on, Jen's like, and we'll make it about you. And that just like Um,
And
just
so
because,
go ahead.
I'm going through that in real time, and I have those examples to talk about more readily available. And I remember in that space, I was just like talking about, well, you have experiences, and how did you come to this, and like doing everything I could to like shift that focus, because that's as much as it feels like there's an attention seeking, it doesn't want to be seen. Like that for me really felt pokey in that moment, but I didn't recognize. I did notice a sense of like I felt irritation, and I felt just kind of off, like not, I wasn't myself, but
Which again,
I wasn't there enough to recognize that I was still in a space.
yeah, which there again, if you go back and watch the beginnings of the episodes and just watch it all the way through, it's 90 minutes, but I think it's a good 90 minutes. Just notice the differences, like what she's talking about how she kind of felt a little bit off inside herself or wasn't feeling thing. You'll notice that there, like her face changes and her behavior, like she was present but she wasn't present. I also wasn't sure because before we got on we had talked about putting on some, we had given announcements, and Leah does the great job of putting stuff in the chat
Common.
and all of that.
And
And so I wasn't sure if that's what was going on. So it's just fascinating to watch. So again, if you're unfamiliar, and Leah, thank you again for just allowing extreme vulnerability to talk about this and to not take it personal and just say, hey, these are things I'm learning and I'm coming to understand on how to remember myself. And um, it was so funny because when we were talking later, I think this is the lead in, and if not, feel free to like just take it where you need to go, Leah. When we were talking later, Leah was like, I actually think you were talking to the space in the podcast. I'm like, I know.
well, I kind of felt it because I normally like being on the podcast, but I found it really interesting how many times I thought to myself, I need to get out of here. I don't want to be here. And then when Jen would talk, She did a really beautiful job of just speaking of her own experience and calling out what the space looks like for her. And I found myself like lost for words and not even knowing how to respond, and just wanting to kind of get out of there, and and feeling parts of me want to lash out, but knowing that we're live, being very mindful of like not lashing out on live video. And so it was interesting to see that. And then I noticed, I think we were talking about that those pieces of us have to die, and like, acknowledging those parts of us and how much they've served us. And when you're talking about like they're just tired, they just want a cookie. And when you talked about that, like I could feel that piece of me just like flare up of like, I don't want a damn cookie. I have work to do. I'm still useful. I'm blah blah blah. And then you had your rebuttal to that, and just how much that piece of me wanted to keep finding any way to take that argument down, that they're still useful. And when I was talking, I noticed Jen kind of smirking, and then I knew like that she saw it too, that she like the space was caught. This I have to preface this talking about this stuff makes me feel a little crazy because it's like noticing the pieces of you and how that just talking about it that way, uh it it brings a lot of stereotypes of talking to yourself and like you're crazy, and it just brings up a lot of stuff for me that way. But I
And
also
again,
know the value of talking about it, so it's not a place of shame, and it's a place of healing and acknowledging, and that I know I'm not the only one that feels that way.
and again, I really appreciate it. Makes me feel really tender, because I know it's an extremely vulnerable space for you. We've talked about it in other podcasts that we've done together, and maybe it's something we could talk about more in depth later on, um, or revisit it. But I want to acknowledge and just say thank you again for your willingness to come on and share it. That it is part of why we're doing this is because it takes the shame out of the story. It takes when we can acknowledge it for ourselves and then we share it with other people, and it opens the door for you to do the same. And to say
Yeah,
it's okay to talk about the shit and
yeah,
the crappy experiences, and not in a victimy kind of way, but like, oh my gosh, I'm learning this about myself. Like, this experience was something that I was in and it was crappy, and this is what how it affected me. This has been my protective or my disassociative or my default behavior as a way to protect myself. And this is what I'm learning about how to remember who I am. And um, I just thank you, Leah, for
yeah.
your journey and the process that you've been through to recognize what has taken place in your world. Like, coming to that recognition is painful, and it's jarring, and it's sometimes it's world upending, and it feels really crappy, and like things you're just going to be puddles of goo and tears on the floor, and you might be, but it's worth it. And it's painful to watch the journey. It's painful sometimes to be in the spaces with that protection, and I'm telling you it's worth it. And so just thank you again for being willing to speak it and take the shame out of it and take your power back. Take your
Well,
strength.
yeah, I appreciate that. I also want to say thank you, just for the space that you've held through that process, and I acknowledge, and I'm learning more about what that experience really is for you, because sometimes when that space in us takes, like, sometimes it just takes over, and you don't even know. It becomes very logical. I say that it's logical because it feels cut and dry. It's black and white.
Except
It's
it runs you in
cold.
circles. runs me in
Yeah.
circles.
There's no feeling to it. It's just like a cutting off, and it becomes self-destructive. And because you've been willing to wade in that mud with me and hold space and help me understand, like, because in the space we can't really communicate, but after, I really appreciate you answering my questions to help me understand what it is I'm doing and how to learn to recognize, because the more what I'm learning is the more I recognize some of those patterns, the more I can catch myself sooner, or see the signs leading up to it, or just I think, the a couple days ago was the first time I was actually able to be with my space
I
instead of
love that you
being
say that.
completely
Be
cut
with
off.
my space. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have been in places where I feel completely cut off. Like there's other parts of me like, hello, where are you? Where are you? This isn't you. And I can hear myself yelling at myself in my head, and you're saying the same things, and um nothing's working, nothing's breaking it. It's like this like freaking iron wall, and I can't get through. No one can get through. But because I've learned when I go to a self-destructive space of like, I'm just going to give this up and this up and that up, and I'll start over. And that's when I know, I'm in that protective space that I will stop at nothing, destroy everything I built, push everyone away. Like that's just my pattern of self-preservation.
So, wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing. And for those of you who feel similar things, no, we love you. We appreciate you and the journey that you're on, and we can hold space for you. You're not crazy. Uh, you're probably a very sensitive, very feeling human being, and we're told that when we feel some of these emotions that we're crazy, and
Or that we don't care. I have a lot of compassion for people who are navigating that space with someone that they care about, because you see them and it looks like them, but it doesn't look like them and it doesn't act like them, and it's not the person that you know and love, and it's like you'll stop at anything to reach that person and bring them back, and to let them know that they're loved and they're safe. But it's heart-wrenching for that person because there's nothing that they can do to break through. It feels like that a lot of
yeah.
times.
And to be honest, we've had some good tussles of because she has said to me that I just want to be hugged, like I just want to have attention, but man, the spikes are so big, it's challenging to get in, and and you I reach for her, or I and that piece just like recoils, and then it really puts stuff in me. Like we've had some tussles, and that's challenging because it's not who I am. It's not how I respond to things, and it's super fascinating because it brings up my own junk, that I get to look at my own junk and where, my own insecurities of wanting to fix it, and then recognizing that this isn't something I can fix. Um, and I get to go in and just really self-reflect there. My junk of having things that I love leave, and recognizing that I know that Leah wouldn't leave, but the pattern, are you okay if I say what I have told you often about the pattern? I've told her, like, the pattern feels like it would happily stab me and walk away and like whatever, sucker. And I know that that's not Leah. It's not easy to experience, but again, it gives me that opportunity to go, what's important? What does it really touch and trigger in me that doesn't feel good? And those are some those can be some challenging moments. And um yeah, so I appreciate you bringing that up very much.
Yeah. I appreciate the space to talk about it. It doesn't feel good. Um, it doesn't feel good when you're in that space, and the destruction that you can create trying to protect. I did want to mention something that I'm also learning about this space and the conversations, and being able to have the conversations that we do, um, being able to catch it before it unravels into something far bigger because of miscommunication. Um, so some things that when I'm in that space, I cannot stand you saying, is like, who's hurt you? Who's hurt you that way? Or I'm not those other people in your world. I want you to kind of walk us through what that actually means to, how do you see that? Because I don't think I've had a super great understanding and how I interpret things that you say, but I do remember one time we were in the car and you said something and it was super like just jarring for me. But you're like, I didn't say it in that way. But because of my own filters and my own protective filters, I heard it with this kind of um, pointedness or like I heard it through a different filter than how you were trying to portray it. So help us understand what that means to
Okay.
that I'm not everyone that's hurt you.
Okay. I will do my best. So I'm not remembering the experience that you're talking about in the car, but a lot of times when this is the thing that really challenges me as far as like with people who are really good at manipulation tools or narcissistic tendencies and practices is that they take good things and they flip them and they use them against the people in their world. And so I could say a phrase like "I love you," and that could be taken as like like something comes up, or I'm trying to think of a better phrase and I can't think of it at the moment. But just things that maybe everyday speak or communication, and it triggers this moment or bringing up certain people or experiences, and it causes this trigger even, and it's not said in the way that it's heard, but because it's heard the way that it's heard, it brings up the protection because it brings up the hurt, it brings up the sometimes it brings up the actual experience and the feelings and the emotions that took place at that time, and that piece that was broken off or has spent all that time protecting you now is like as an adult you or grown wiser person, this piece of you from way back there that's protecting you is like I got to get into gear, and it like it gears up and armors up, and then it's like, oh, and they're like, well, you just said that, and I'm like, I actually didn't say that. Like, I said those words, but that's not what I said. That's not what I'm saying to you. And oh my gosh, sometimes we've gone the rounds, and I finally like it clicks in for me like, okay, this isn't about what's happening right now. And almost always when there's shizzle going down, it's not about the current situation. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times, especially when there's so much emotion and drive and anger attached to this, whatever has happened, whatever the trigger or the hurt point is, it's something that's happened way back there. I happen to know Leah's story. Um, I don't know all of the people, but I know her story. And so it's easy I shouldn't say it's easy. Um, because I've learned what I've learned, and I know that when it's that intense, it's not about the moment. It's about, and you see the protection, it's about back there. And that's when I say to her things like, I'm really sorry and for the experiences you've had and the people who have hurt you this way. And that it feels like the protection has to come up, and usually there's more because it's like I want to be seen but I don't want to be seen, and this is about you, and I have to like I bring my own demeanor down the best that I can. I'm human. Sometimes I buy into the energy, and we're doing the thing. But when I recognize it, I can say, what's this really about? Which is the other thing she really hates. She doesn't. The protection hates because it's like, well, damn, now I've been seen. Like it's not about you, and I can't keep putting on you, and now I have to feel because the space, like she said earlier, doesn't want to feel, and it doesn't want to talk about itself. It wants to keep putting everything out there. and it doesn't want to talk about what happened back there, or that this is the thing that's actually causing hurt in the moment by what was said unintentionally and in a very different way. Did I make that clear as mud?
No, I think you did a great job going through what all of that means. Because it's taken me some time. One, because it just feels challenging to just see what that is. Because especially if you've never had a place where you can share, if you've tried to share things, it's diminished. If gaslighting has been a big part of your world, like, or just any of that can really make you doubt and go to judgment. And so it's like, I will protect this at all costs because I get to have a voice. And I think because I feel safe with you, um, I engage in that a little bit more. Not on purpose, but like
Right.
I think because I feel safe and you've said this is a safe place and you've created that space, like created that space. I think it's like testing against everything that I have known about communication and about love and about just relationship and those parts of me have to see it out because it's never worked before or it's never been a safe place before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I find that fascinating. Like, we often we spend so much time in protection we don't even really recognize it. Um, and we think it's just normal. We think that's just who we are, and the reality is it's probably not. Like I said, I've been getting to recognize and see my own patterns and my own ways that I've shown up as protection, and it's not always very fun to look at, but it's fascinating to go through some of that and go, oh my gosh, it's also painful and sometimes feels gross. Like, like there's that thing, but gaining the understanding of that, of why you showed up in that way and being able to transform it, release it, whatever that is for you, is so um, uh, uh, energizing, healing, um, and powerful. So I just thought of this as you were talking, as you're coming, as you're on your journey and you're wanting to learn some things, and we were talking about ways we all can manipulate. I came across a book called 30 Covert Emotional Manipulation Tactics. It was a very, it's a short book. It's under 2 hours. Um, we listened to it on Audible. No, I do not get paid to promote that. Um, but I would highly recommend. It was very fascinating. It was straightforward, and maybe there's some ways in there that you can go, oh, I do that to people, or I have done that, or I have used that tactic, or oh, I recognize that that has been something that has been used. Um, I'm gonna say against you. And oh, that one, I recognize that one now. Or oh, just put words to like how I felt about that. And just very fascinating. Just maybe to put some understanding to what you've been feeling.
I think that's so interesting. It's not, and I want to preface this, it's not about labeling
No,
people.
no.
It's more about just recognizing patterns and how to safeguard yourself, so you don't get caught up in the patterns because, you know, knowingly or not, but I think it's more knowing. But we want to believe the best about people, especially people we care about. It's challenging to see them that way and to assimilate that or process that in our own selves that how did we not see it? How do, but it slowly erodes at your sense of self, your sense of identity, your sense of worth, your confidence, all of that stuff. And it's so subtle you don't even notice it's happening until it's too late.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes you feel like you're in your pit you can't climb out of. Um,
Yeah. but you
Which,
don't even know. I think
yeah.
in my experience, it's, I had gone into a relationship. I was very young. There was I had no one around me, and I really I mentioned this because it's easy to get into judgment of like, how did I not see that? And in learning these things, I'm having to move through a lot of those feelings, and a lot of feelings of like being super hyper aware, which I think is part of the protection as well, of like, I don't want to do this again. And it feels like anything is like potential for getting caught up in manipulation again. Because once you recognize it, you can't unsee it. But then you can arm yourself with the tools to move out of that, and give yourself grace and love for the lessons you got to learn.
Agreed. Well, and I think too, it goes back to what I was saying earlier of you've got to know how to be enough inside yourself that you can trust your gut instincts, you can trust your intuition of what's being said so that when something that has been used against you or words that are spoken in just like I say conversation or in loving tones that were used against you in the past, you can have a gut sense of like, okay, I'm feeling a trigger, but is that how this was meant? Like, how does it feel in this situation? Um, it brings me that the study that Natalie shared with us yesterday about following your gut instinct. And it's a study where they put people in like sweatsuits or suits that collect sweat, and they put people like some of the people were on a treadmill, sweating, 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 you know, sweat being collected in their sweatsuits. And some people they did the same thing, put them in the same kind of suits and sent them skydiving. And then they
Oh,
collected their sweat. And then they took the samples and put them on papers or whatever, smell tabs, the sweat from the skydiving and the sweat from the treadmill. And people had visceral responses or not to the different smells of sweat, of fear or of just like, whatever. And so it's that coming inside yourself enough in these kinds of situations that you have that sense of self and you can trust your gut and be like, maybe that really wasn't meant that way. And I trust this person and the relationship that we've built and are building. I trust our communication, and the pattern. Thank you for wanting to show up. I appreciate it. I got this. You can just go to the park or whatever. So, Leah,
yeah.
you talked yesterday about, and you mentioned it today about being with the pattern. Will you talk about that a little bit more and share more of what you talked about last night about what that felt like, um, how you moved through that? Because I thought that was a very interesting experience, and it was interesting to witness, and I think it's really cool and important um, to share. So someone listening may go, I
Yeah.
get that, or oh, that I feel that too.
Um, so I mentioned earlier in this conversation of like, sometimes I feel shut off from that. There's parts of me that are trying to like I feel nothing. So I have felt cut off from the space. So I don't feel like I can have influence over the space. Um, like it's like something's clicked in and shut everything down, and that process is going through
So,
its rounds.
so it kind of overrides sanity, intelligence, anything that you actually have learned how to use
Yeah.
as
Yeah, like I
communication.
don't I think one of the best examples you gave me
Mhm.
was what was it now? Basically that I get very black and white. And if you know anything about me and have ever talked to me, you know that I live in a world of grays. Like I'm all about the grays. And in those
Which is
spaces,
color.
I am very, huh?
I said gray's our color.
Yeah. I'm very black and white in those spaces. So uh, I don't I don't feel like I have access in those places because there's, you know, things are being said or being done and all it is like uh this woman that talked about it, she said hers was called Knives Out. And I thought, yeah, that's kind of what it feels like. It's like at all costs. So to be with the space is one that I recognized it. As soon
Huge.
as it came into play, I saw it on my face. I saw my whole demeanor shift. And I vocalized it. I said, wow, that really pissed me off to acknowledge that, okay, I see you. And um, I felt like it was letting who I was talking to know, hey, this really poked at me. And then I got to have the experience of just being with it. And I found what was different about this time was that I could question it. You know, that I had ruminations of like, I was upset and then I'd
So
be like,
are
what are
you
you holding
saying
on to? What are you upset?
okay, I apologize. Are you
Go
saying
ahead.
that you were you present enough to have like conversation with it? Because you've never talked about that before. Like it has just taken you over, and this time you're like, I actually had an awareness. So you were aware enough in as you to talk
I
to
was
the
aware as myself that I was in a space.
okay.
I could see it. I could see the amping up of it. I could I still felt the detached, but I was still there. Like it's not like I checked out because sometimes in those spaces you'll recount things to me and I have no memory of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that feels really challenging for me because I try to be very aware of how I talk and how I treat people, how I move in the
And
world
you
because
are. You
yeah,
are.
and because of how I was treated in some places in my world, right? Like I'm very mindful of that. And so when you recount some of that stuff, like I go through my own shame shit storms because I'm like that's not who I am. I would never do that. But to hear that I would do that is hard. Um so being with the space really just meant like I noticed it. I knew I was in it. I still had the want to shut down and shut out. But I was taking active steps to not engage in that as best as I could. It was like sending a message or reaching out. And it's not, I know I could have taken another step. I didn't know it in that place. And I don't feel like I could have done it in that space. But one of the biggest thing is asking for what you need and talking about what your feelings because that space thrives on you not talking about what you're feeling. And unless it's a way to attack, unless it's a way to put blame. So, I'm reaching out, I'm doing these things and and then feeling myself get amped up because I'm doing my damn best to to stay in good space and not have a lash out, just be with the space and it's funny because I noticed myself going off the rails with stuff in my own. I had a long drive that day, so I could see myself kind of arguing with someone and then bringing it back to like okay but why do you feel like that why does that feel so important and I was able to question it so I wasn't completely taken over but it still felt dominant like it that piece of me still felt very um aggressive. It still felt very intense. Like the intensity that goes on in that space is overwhelming. And I also got to notice the lies that I hear from that space. So one is like it's too tiring to address this. It's too tiring to have that conversation. Like it's a discouragement of of addressing what's causing it, what's the underlying pieces. So, yeah, being with that space was hard and interesting. Um, and I I also feel like it was important to help out of that space to have that interaction, and it was messy. It's always messy when there's the first engagement, especially if you're not sure what you're walking into being you. Um, and having your own feels and hurts and stuff like because there's your own protective space of like I don't want you to chew my head off, right? I don't want to be caught off in this dynamic because as the you, it can feel like you can feel really helpless.
Yeah. I
So,
appreciate you sharing all of that. I really appreciated like when you were talking about it that you said um the you that actually was able to stay in awareness uh, got to ask questions to the space. And I think yesterday you said, I recognized that the space treats me like it treats you.
mm,
It
yeah.
gives me the same, stonewalling or, or bullshitting or just like no feeling. I thought that was very, really like, it's just like big ahas. But also that
Well,
like, I recognize like it's tiring to it takes a lot of energy to engage with the space and you even said it still took me over but I was more aware in that moment and it I just thought that was fabulous and you were able to come out of it faster and maybe it's because it happened live. I loved it when she's like, I totally knew I was caught because I saw you smiling and I knew I had been caught. Just a recognition of that is a big old step and in taking shame out of it and recognizing like, oh my gosh, okay, it's and I want to make sure and make very clear that you as the listener know that Leah and I talk about these interactions when they occur as that when I'm sharing how I'm experiencing it, that I make sure that I designate that I see it as the space, the protection, the what else do we call it? The fear. I never intentionally put it that Leah is behaving that way and that she is doing those things. We have a very clear designation like I recognize the difference and we talk about it as the difference. And so we
sorry, go on.
oh go ahead.
I just I just want to acknowledge what you're saying of like that's so important because moving through some of that, it brings up so much shame and guilt and like how could I behave that way and I want to do it different. But that and it's not about not taking responsibility. Like I'm more than willing to take responsibility for the pieces that I feel like I have control of. It's not an excuse. It's just more I appreciate that you acknowledge that it's not me and it's not how I would normally be. And it gives me a benefit of the doubt that motivates me to continue to move forward and understand and work with it in a different way. Um, I think something you said to me last night was, I don't judge you. I don't judge you for these spaces, and I don't judge you for what you're moving through. But you do have a lot of judgment, like as in you're talking to me that I have a lot of judgment of myself, and I think that just comes from being judged by the people in my world for expressing any sort of feeling or emotion, or you'd be called crazy or you're overreacting, or the minimization and all of that just kind of chips away at your sense of self.
Yeah. Oh, holy cow. I know Leah has yoga here in just a little bit. Uh, and so we want to make sure you get there on time. But Leah, I just want to say thank you for being willing to come on and have this extended conversation as part of the conversation that took place on the Wednesday, March 20th, Living Courageously Exposed episode. And just again, your vulnerability to just be real and raw and honest with this about what the experience is, recognizing that you were in it yesterday as we were having this conversation, and again sticking with it and recognizing, and then we call it melting, melting into that and allowing yourself to be real inside of that conversation as well. But just your willingness to come on today and just share the ahas of yesterday, and like, whoa, I'm actually learning to be present with the space and learning to see it for myself, and to stand with it, and not stand in judgment of it, but whatever that learning is for you, and it will continue. And so for you who are learning this for yourself, whether it's you who are getting to have these experiences or you're sharing them with someone else, one, we love you. We honor and appreciate your journey, and we hope that this conversation is helpful, that you have found some tidbits that you can take to heart, tidbits that you can lessen the shame, and to recognize that you're human, and you're not crazy, and sometimes crazy is okay. Like, there's been a lot of things I've been called crazy for, and and that's okay too. But that you're a human being with an entire full range of emotions, and you may be someone who feels emotion a lot and in big ways, and it doesn't make you crazy. It just makes you a sensitive, feeling human being. And I think the more we can um, normalize that and take the shame out of being feeling human beings, the happier we'll be, the happier our families can be, our societies can be. Um, so we encourage feeling, and just recognizing that being human's pretty freaking awesome, even with all the ups and downs.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that is probably one of the hardest things, uh, just as anyone moving through some of that is trust yourself that that's not who you think it is. It's really challenging not to take it personally. It's meant personally. It's there's intentionality to push you away because you shared a video with me a while ago of like a cat having a reaction and the mother cat just staying calm, and the cat's like freaking out, the baby cat's freaking out, and just being calm. And that's the hardest thing that you can do, but just trusting that something different is one of the best channels to healing and transcending that experience and growing from it.
I love it. I appreciate you bringing up the cat video. I don't watch cat videos, but that one was amazing. And maybe it's something we can post over on the Righteous Rebels Facebook group. Um, the breathing on our podcast, we regularly do breathing just as a way for us to become present inside of the podcast, and to share with you just quick tools to regulate the nervous system, to bring the heart and the gut and the head into coherence, to be present with yourself, and to find nervous system regulation. And I think that's one of the things that we're talking about here, is just learning how to deactivate the overactive nervous systems that we have just had to have in order to survive a lot of life, and especially right now. So this is my invitation to breathe some more, to give people a little, yourself first, a little extra grace, and to give that out to the people around you, especially when it appears that they're behaving badly, and to recognize that they probably just have some shizzle going on. And I'm not saying, in no way am I saying to keep unhealthy or toxic relationships in your world, or to continue putting yourself inside them. I'm not saying that at all. Um, that's you got to trust yourself there, of what's healthy for you. But in relationships that mean something to you, uh, just give yourselves a little bit more grace and the other person as well. So, last thoughts for you, sister?
Love it. Thanks for I think that was my last thought. Just believe in something bigger, something different. And it's freaking hard, but if they're willing, um, and ask questions, like I think that's been a huge game changer for me, is that we can have conversations post issue and that we can talk it out. So I have a better understanding and I can learn to catch it sooner.
Well,
And
and
it's not about you often. It feels very personal,
yeah,
and it's not diminishing the pain and the heartache that it causes. But it's also part of learning and moving through hard things and healing the pieces of us that have just never had the opportunity to heal, have
yeah,
never felt safe to heal.
I love it. I love it. And staying self-reflective inside of yourself and then being honest and sharing those things, even when it feels scary. We talk about that often. "Oh, this feels a little scary to share," but it just brings different insights and different strength to each other and to the relationship. So, all right, Leah, I know
Yeah.
you got to head out. Thank you again for
Yeah,
joining.
I'm like, oh shoot.
I know. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Remember, be bold, be
Be
courageous,
courageous.
be a rebel. We'll see you soon.